Hello there and welcome. I'm Rosanna Lockwood. You're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya News headquarters. These are our top stories. The Lebanese Red Cross says 18 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike in northern Lebanon as Israel continues its bombardment of Gaza. The EU condemns Israel's attacks on peacekeepers in Lebanon as Netanyahu accuses UNIFIL of acting as a human shield for Hezbollah after a fifth UN staff member is injured. And with just 3 weeks to go until Election Day, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris hold dueling events in the pivotal battleground state of Pennsylvania. We get the latest from Washington. Welcome. Well, the Lebanese Red Cross says 18 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on Aitu in northern Lebanon. This marks the first time Israel has targeted the Christian-majority northern region in the past year of hostilities. Israel has not yet commented on that strike. The Lebanese Health Ministry is stating that 51 people were killed by Israeli strikes across the country on Sunday. In Gaza, Hamas-run authorities say an Israeli attack on a school used as a shelter resulted in 22 deaths, including 15 children. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees saying the building was intended for administering polio vaccines. Israel claims it was housing Hamas militants. At least 4 Palestinians have been killed and dozens others injured after Israeli fighter jets bombed a tent camp on the grounds of Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital officials say 25 people were transferred to the Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza after suffering severe burns. Elsewhere, a Hezbollah drone attack on Sunday night killed 4 Israeli soldiers at an army base south of Haifa, making it one of the deadliest attacks by Hezbollah in over a year of conflict. Well, there's a lot to talk about there. For reaction to all of that, I'm joined by Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, the Israeli military's spokesperson. Look, let's just start with your personnel. Those 4 soldiers killed in the Hezbollah claimed drone strike last night. Today, Israel's military repelling attacks by the Islamic resistance in Iraq, Syria also sending drones as well. Are you seeing that there's coordinated attacks towards your military facilities at the moment?
Well, we've seen this throughout over a year now, that Iran and its proxies have been attacking us from 7 fronts in the same time. This is a multi-front war that we've been facing that is driven by Iran. And just like last night, the attack on our military base was used by, and you guessed it, an Iranian UAV. This is part of those attacks that have been going on for over a year now. If we're talking about the northern front, Hezbollah alone have fired over 13,000 missiles, rockets, and UAVs towards Israel. So this is not a new thing, not a new type of aggression. This is something they've been trying for a year. We've had good success rates intercepting them, but again, this threat is so large. Sadly, sometimes these types of incidents happen, and we will investigate them and learn from them and understand how to prevent them in the future. But this is part of the Iranian aggression. Hezbollah has been operating as an Iranian proxy and basically choosing Iran over the people of Lebanon, prioritizing them and choosing Iran over the people of Lebanon and dragging Lebanon and the whole region into this war.
Look, indeed, there was some are saying it was a huge security failing last night because this is the most, if we can say those terms, successful strike from the point of view of Iran and Hezbollah in terms of killing 4 Israeli soldiers in a base. The strike apparently around a cafeteria, based on certain reports. You can probably tell us more. But why was the strike not intercepted, as many strikes are previously in Israel?
Well, there was a problem in the identification of that UAV, and again, saying there's been hundreds and many hundreds of UAVs flown towards Israel in this war. We've had very good interception rates, talking in a world standard. Over 80% of those attacks have been intercepted, but the amount and the difficulty is something we are facing and learning. And in this case, we were able to thwart one UAV that was coming in, and the second one was able to get away. And that's part of what we're studying at the moment. But we have made it clear. We will go after the UAV units in Hezbollah. We will find them. We will dismantle them. We will destroy those UAVs and those operators. A lot of them Iranian UAVs. A lot of them have been trained by Iran, and we will go after them to remove this threat of Israeli civilians and Israeli soldiers.
Today, your Defence Minister Yoav Gallant vowing a forceful response for that drone attack. What will that look like?
Well, we've been operating, defending ourselves against Hezbollah, but also in recent weeks have been operating also to actively remove those threats. Hezbollah has seen our abilities. Hezbollah has seen what happens when we decide to put a lot of effort and focus using our intelligence, our Air Force, as we have done with their rocket launcher abilities, with their senior commanders' abilities, and we'll do the same with their UAV abilities now. We will be going after them, removing the threat of them, and removing those terrorists who operate them.
Now let's talk about your military offensives on, you called it the Northern Front there. That's obviously, and then you've got what's going on in Gaza as well. And there is international horror today. The pictures from Israel's attack on Gaza's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, pictures of people burning alive, videos that have made it round the world. What do you say to that? How can you justify those types of actions?
Well, first of all, any life to any loss of innocent life is a tragedy on both sides. This is not a war we chose. This is a war that Hamas started with a brutal massacre on October 7th. And ever since, we've been trying to fight Hamas while Hamas is hiding behind their civilians. And we've seen it happen again. You know, this is part of their strategy, part of their tactics to hide behind civilians. We've seen them move from mosques to UN facilities, to schools, to hospitals, hiding there, operating from there, carrying out terror attacks. And what happened in this case, we carried out a precise attack against those terrorists who were operating in that area, planning to carry out terror attacks against soldiers and Israeli civilians. And you can see in the videos that are hard to watch, I agree, you can see those secondary explosions. And what we understand in our initial inquiry to the event is that a secondary explosions caused the fire that caused this sad result. And it comes to show exactly what we're talking about. Why are those rockets there? Why are those explosives there? Why is there secondary explosions in an area of a hospital? I think that is a question that needs to be asked for Hamas, and we can say very clearly, every loss of innocent life on both sides is a tragedy. We do everything we can. A lot of, in a lot of cases, we give a notice for people to get out of harm's way. That is something that most armies don't do. The most important element in war is the element of surprise, and every time we have the chance or the possibility to do so, we do it. Our goal has been very clear: to prevent harm to civilians, to go after this terror organization that promised if they get another chance, they'll commit another October 7th. And that is what we're doing. And we're also looking into this incident because, as I said again, every loss of innocent life is a tragedy.
Just talking about that, those requests or the orders for people to evacuate in northern Gaza, you've asked 400,000 people, it's expected, are around there, to move to the south because there's going to be a period of sustained military activity there. Apart from the criticisms of where they'll go and how you can move that size of people around, there's analysis asking whether you're going to try and adopt what's being called the General's Plan, which is this idea of kind of laying siege to northern Gaza, blocking food and water after you've evacuated people, and anybody left will be considered a terror target. Is that the case? No,
I will say it very clearly. It is not the case. Just today, we've seen trucks of aids go into northern Gaza. And in the last year plus, we have been doing everything in our ability to make sure aid is coming into Gaza. Hamas has been doing everything in their ability to make sure that aid does not get directly to the people of Gaza. Over 1 million tons of aid have gone into Gaza. And what's happening right now in northern Gaza, in addition to the trucks going in with aid today, we are fighting against Hamas, who is trying to regroup in the area of Jabalia. And this is a hardcore of Hamas terrorists fighting us in a very densely populated area, and we want to make sure those civilians get a chance to get out of harm's way. That is what we're doing, and at the same time, we're fighting this terror group that has a plan to murder us, but not just soldiers, to murder Israeli civilians, and we're fighting them in Jabalia. And I can tell you, it's heavy battles that are being conducted in that area. We've had numerous accounts of heavy fire towards our forces. We've had injured soldiers. We've even had casualties in recent days because of Hamas fire from that area in Jabalia.
Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani of the Israel military speaking to us tonight. Well, to get the other side of things, I'm now joined by Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, General Secretary of the Palestinian National Initiative and member of the Palestinian Legislative Council. And I'm not sure if you managed to hear the conversation I just had there with Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, but I will start by asking you the same question about the pictures from Gaza overnight, the Israeli attack, causing horror around the world, seeing people in sort of flames, or videos have been shared widely. Do you think any of that is going to add any pressure on the way Israel is conducting its military operations, sir?
No, because the West is supporting Israel, because most of the Western governments are continuing their unlimited support to Israel, although it has committed terrible crimes. Because the United States of America keeps telling the world that they are defending Israel, and they keep sending Israel all kinds of military equipment, including 50,000 tons of explosives that are used in Gaza. But on the other hand, I'm really surprised. I didn't hear everything that was said, but I think what we are dealing with is a fascist government, a fascist Israeli system, a fascist Israeli parties, a fascist Israeli people who are committing terrible genocide in Gaza. What can justify killing 17,000 Palestinian children? What can justify the bombardment that you have just described, burning people alive? And all these lies that they keep telling about fighters hiding among the civilian population. The big question here is why Israel is occupying Palestinians for 76 years? Why Israel displaced 70% of the Palestinian people in 1948, committing terrible massacres to force them out? And why the Israeli army is now starving the people of the northern parts of Gaza, trying to push them again out of their country? 70% of the population of Gaza are refugees from the land that they've been evicted from in 1948. And now they want to conduct another genocide, another collective punishment, and another act of ethnic cleansing. That is the reality of what the Israeli army is doing. They claim to be moral, but where is morality in killing 52,000 Palestinians, 70% of whom are women and children and elderly people? All what we have heard are lies after lies after lies from a terrorist army, from a terrorist state. Yes, there is terrorism here, and the terrorist is Israel. The state of Israel, if you can call it a state, is nothing but a fascist entity that continues to commit genocide, collective punishment, and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population. Why are they invading Lebanon? Who is the aggressor here? And Lebanon said, Hezbollah said, they will stop the fighting immediately if Israel stops the attacks on Gaza. That's what Iran said. That's what Iraq said. Who killed Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, in Tehran? Wasn't it the Israeli side? Who attacked and bombarded places everywhere now in Lebanon, including Christian communities, as you have described? This is a country of aggression that never stopped its aggression on Palestinian people, on Arab people, occupying other people's lands, and not only occupying our land, but annexing them to Israel as well.
Sir, you've made it your life's work to obviously campaign on the part of Palestinian people, politically, socially, everything. At some points, I believe you were supportive of a two-state solution, but you describe now the people of Israel as fascist, not just the government, not just the military. You say the fascist Israeli people. How far are we now from having any sort of diplomatic channel through this off-ramp out of this military action?
I didn't say that all Israelis are fascists, but I say I mean that most of the Israeli society has moved towards fascism, yes. And without that, you would not have seen this fascist government. But there are people in Israel who want to see real peace. There are Jewish people in the United States of America who support Palestinian people and organize demonstrations in support of Palestine. And these noble people give us hope that there is a different kind of people with whom we can deal, but not this Israeli government. Unfortunately, not the majority of the Israeli society, who are advocating now not only aggression on Palestinians, but also on Iran, on Lebanon, on Iraq, on Jordan, and on other countries. And is there a place for diplomatic solution? There was, but Israel killed it. The Palestinian Authority concluded or signed Oslo Agreement, which I found unjust, but nevertheless, they were the official representative of the Palestinian people, the PLO, and they signed an agreement which gives Palestinians eventually only a little state on 22% of the land of historic Palestine, instead of 44%, which was assigned by the United Nations decision that allowed Israel to exist. And Palestinians recognized Israel. Israel never recognized Palestine. Who killed Oslo Agreement? Netanyahu. Who killed the possibility of peace? The Israeli governments. Who stopped negotiations? It was Israel. Who is conducting settlement expansion every day in the occupied Palestinian territories in violation of international law? It is Israel. Who is organizing these settlers to be gangs, terrorizing Palestinian communities and evicting them from their homes in the West Bank? It is the Israeli government and the Israeli army. So in my opinion, when you have a situation where 7.3 million Palestinians live on the land of historic Palestine versus 7.1 Jewish people, what's the solution? It's either two states, which they refuse, or one democratic state, which they also refuse. What is their solution? Ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Isn't that fascism?
Sir, before we run out of time in the show, I just want to talk to you about what is also happening in northern Gaza with orders from the Israeli military for around, it's believed, 400,000 people to move to the south of Gaza. Hamas, meanwhile, sending messages telling those people not to move. And there appears to be a sustained period of military conflict from Israel coming. Talk to me about your concerns.
Well, I also say that people should not. Why should people leave their homes? Where should they go to? You know that Israel evicted already about 1.7 million people out of their homes, and then they put them in the south in a strip that is no more than 22 square kilometers, deprived of food, deprived of water, deprived of shelters, deprived of medications, living in horrible conditions, no bathrooms, no shelters, no latrines, nothing. The people are in horrible situation. The people in the north of Gaza don't want to leave because they've seen what happened to their relatives who left. And still, they were bombarded also in the south. So you can be killed in the north or in the south. Now, I am a medical doctor, as you know, and we have medical teams now working in Gaza. They report to us horrible things. People are shattered and killed in the streets. Their bodies are lying on the ground. Nobody can even bury them. If people are injured, nobody can get to them to treat them. Houses are demolished and burned down. Tanks are moving around, shooting and bombarding people. No supplies of food has been allowed into northern Gaza for 12 days now. No medications is allowed there. Our medical teams cannot move around to treat the injured people. And now the 3 left hospitals there were attacked several times, and the Israeli army is trying to force the doctors and nurses to get out of the hospitals and leave their patients. That is the reality of what's happening in the northern part of Gaza.
Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as the world awaits Israel's response to Iran's attack, Iraq has warned Iran and Israel not to use its airspace for retaliation against each other, as Iran's Prime Minister tries to keep the country out of a potential wider regional war. But interests within the country may make that difficult, as Stuart Smith reports from Baghdad.
With the region on edge ahead of Israel's promised retaliation, Baghdad is trying to balance competing interests. The government says its priority is keeping Iraqis safe, and while it's incredibly critical of Israel's actions in Gaza and Lebanon, it does not want to get involved militarily. Not all agree, though, with keeping out of the fight. A group calling itself the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, which has ties to Iran, continues to use drones daily to attack Israeli positions, earlier in the month killing 2 Israeli soldiers. Many worry that its actions against the government's wishes could make Iraq vulnerable to retaliation from Israel. Baghdad would rather position itself as a potential mediator in the conflict, a third party that can make use of good communication channels between Iran and the United States. Should a wider regional war break out, Prime Minister al-Sudani warns a terrorist resurgence in the region could follow from the chaos. Stuart Smith, Al Arabiya News, Baghdad.
Well, let's get some of the day's other news now. Pakistan's capital is under 8 strict lockdown ahead of a gathering of world powers, with Chinese Premier Li Qiang arriving for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. A 3-day holiday is in effect in Islamabad as extensive police and military presence secures the city. The threat level remains high following deadly attacks over the past week. China's military began a new round of war games near Taiwan today, labelling them a warning to the, quote, separatist acts of Taiwan independence forces. Taiwan, which is governed democratically and considered by China to be its own territory, had been on alert for further military exercises following President Liu Xingtie's National Day speech last week. China's war games have drawn condemnation from both Taipei and the US. South Korea saying it is ready to respond to North Korea after the latter ordered troops on the border. The escalating dialogue comes as the North blames its southern neighbour of flying leaflets across the border, a charge the South denies. Seoul says North Korea may blow up roads connecting the South and, quote, completely separate its territory. Let's go to Lebanon now, where the European Union elsewhere condemned Israel's attacks on UN peacekeepers operating in Lebanon after a 5th peacekeeper was injured in the south of the country. Now, this does follow claims made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is hindering the Israeli army by keeping peacekeepers in the danger zone. In a video on Sunday, he also accused UNIFIL of acting as a human shield for Hezbollah.
I would like to appeal directly to the UN Secretary General. It is time for you to remove UNIFIL from Hezbollah strongholds and from the fighting areas. The IDF has repeatedly asked for this and has been met with repeated refusals, all aimed at providing a human shield to Hezbollah terrorists. Your refusal to evacuate the UNIFIL soldiers makes them hostages of Hezbollah. This endangers both them and the lives of our soldiers. We regret the injury to the UNIFIL soldiers, and we are doing everything in our power to prevent this injury. But the simple and obvious way to ensure this is simply to get them out of the danger zone.
Mr. Secretary General, get the UNIFIL forces out of harm's way. It should be done right now, immediately.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined from Beirut by Dr. Sami, the director of the Institute of Political Science, St. Joseph University. Thanks for joining us again. Let's just talk about... Thank you for having me. Thank you. So let's talk about UNIFIL then. Is Israel trying to push UNIFIL out of southern Lebanon?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from Israeli perspective, the UNIFIL mission could not throughout the year stop Hezbollah from conducting its operation into northern Israel, nor to have the 1701 implemented. In fact, since day one, since the adoption of the resolution, the mandate of this force was not that clear. Whether this resolution was under the Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, in fact, its wording was more like to be under Chapter 6 because it was more than an observer's mission and asked the UNIFIL to implement security on the ground, ensure security on the ground. And this resolution was building on the resolution 1559 that calls for disarming of all militia. However, even though the wording was strong, the resolution was adopted under Chapter 6, meaning there is no obligation to use force in order to implement it. And today, it's obvious that Israel wants this UNIFIL to be out of the picture, to have a free hand, to have not to encounter any hindrance in conducting its military operation, especially that the declared military operation is to ensure a belt of security all along the border between Israel and Lebanon, a 5-kilometer depth of all along the border. So the presence of the UNIFIL there could present a hindrance to implementing the plan. And this is as well a message to the United Nations for any possible resolution to be adopted in order to have it to have a mission more strongly defined in that sense that if there is any help to be provided to the Lebanese army, it should be under the chapter, a new resolution should be under Chapter 7.
And just while we have you, given your expertise and given you are in Lebanon, I want to ask you about today's Israeli attack on the Christian-dominated north, as it's been described, of Lebanon. For our international viewers, can you talk about why that is significant?
I mean, it's clear that Israel is going after every single Hezbollah operatives. And it's clear that after the recent Israeli operation targeting all Hezbollah leaders, whether political leaders or operation leaders on the ground, like all the middle rank leaders. And now they are widespread all over Lebanon because they are leaving areas like the southern suburb of Beirut or the south, try to seek a more secured region. And I mean, maybe betting that Israel will not go after them in this remote region. But in fact, what we have seen in the ground is Israeli military operation being conducted in the Druze area, like in the Shuf, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and now in the Christian side. And this is as well to put the pressure on those sectarian group to not to welcome any Hezbollah or suspected Hezbollah people in their land and between their civilians. And the price is like what we've seen today, is the civilians who are paying the heavy price of the possible Hezbollah presence among them.
Just finally, what are your fears for Lebanon in the coming days?
mean, because this is a very fractured society, because now it had to suffer a huge wave of refugees coming from the south, from the Bega, and given the deep political divide around Hezbollah arms and Hezbollah monopolizing the decision of peace and war and paralyzing the state institution, and in fact their takeover of the state, I fear the possible backlash and sectarian rife, something similar to what happened during the Civil War. But in fact, but given the level of awareness of the civilian people, up to now, the threat has been contained. But the question is, what if this war drag, and there are many reasons to think that this the tension among the sectarian group, among the pro-Hezbollah constituency and the anti-Hezbollah one, will come to a clash.
Dr. Sami, Nadir, the Director of the Institute of Political Science at St. Joseph University, thank you for your time. Well, to some business news now. Italy's biggest bank apologising for a security break supposedly involving Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. An Intesa Sanpaolo employee has been fired after reportedly spying on the bank accounts of thousands of customers, including the Premier and other high-profile customers. British luxury brand Mulberry considering a $145 million takeover deal. That's after its second largest shareholder, Frasers Group, significantly raised an $83 million bid previously rejected by the loss-making company. 3 professors have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for their work on economies post-colonization. Their research focusing on the importance of institutions. In a statement, the prize saying their work gave insight into vast differences in prosperity between nations. Well, heading stateside now, where it's just over 3 weeks until Americans go to the ballot box to decide their next leader. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump holding competing events today in the crucial battleground state of Pennsylvania as they make their final pitches to voters just weeks before Election Day. Harris will speak in Erie, while Trump will host a town hall on the economy in the suburbs of Philadelphia. For more, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by our correspondent, Benji Hyer. Benji, good to see you. Give us the latest from the trail. Both candidates in Pennsylvania today.
They are former US President and current Vice President hot on each other's heels again, hosting dueling events in Pennsylvania where the election may be won or lost. It is called the Keystone State. Fittingly, it could decide who holds the keys to the building behind me, because Pennsylvania and its huge natural gas industry really has the power to sway this contest. 19 electoral votes are up for grabs. That's the most out of any swing state. It fell to Donald Trump in 2016, Joe Biden in 2020, both times you might recall by the narrowest of margins. And remarkably, in the past 50 years, Pennsylvania has only picked the losing candidate twice. So it is no surprise that both nominees this time round are back in the fossil fuel hub where they are tied neck and neck. This is Harris's 10th time there in past months. Just last week, Trump made several stops in the state. It's also where he was almost assassinated in July. And a big focus, as I just mentioned, will be energy, because if you drill into the matters that are at the heart of why voters are voting in certain ways in the sprawling hills of Pennsylvania, you find that it is energy. It is fracking, which is the hot button issue. That process of blasting resources from the ground has helped make the United States the largest oil and gas producer in the world, but it has also become a polarizing political point. Donald Trump slamming Kamala Harris's comments that she made during her first bid for the presidency years ago. She said at the time she'd ban fracking. She's since U-turned, not promising not to ban that practice, which helps fuel the economy in Pennsylvania. But still, Harris's initial remarks have sort of stuck in many people's minds, and her change of stance, her flip-flopping on fracking, if you like, that sits in very stark contrast to Trump's full-throated endorsement. Their appearances there today will focus on that. They will also be following a flurry of sort of vociferous weekend campaign trail activity. Donald Trump again railing against immigration, threatening even to target his political enemies if he wins next month. Harris, on the other hand, questioning her rival's health as he vies for the Oval Office for the third time.
And Benji, you've already given me a taste there in terms of the battleground states, but what are the polls saying nationwide? Who's ahead at the moment?
Well, nationally, pretty tight. It's a dead heat. But of course, what people shouldn't forget is what decides this election is just those handful of states like Pennsylvania. And even in them, it is often too close to call. So I think that it's a very finely balanced election. Even small changes among certain groups could be all the difference between winning or losing. What I have found interesting, and I've just come from Georgia a few days ago, a state that could go either way. And it's in places like Georgia that we're seeing the Harris camp try to make some gains in deeply red Republican counties. Now, even if she loses in those counties, and she likely will, what she's trying to do is narrow the margins overall in those areas, move the needle just that little bit. And the hope for her is that those gains could make a bigger difference, especially given that polls are showing that a portion of young, inner city, black males especially, the traditionally blue base for the Democratic Party, they're shifting away from the Democrats in part towards Donald Trump.
Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Benji Hyer, thank you. A reminder of our top stories now. The Lebanese Red Cross saying 18 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike in northern Lebanon as Israel continues its bombardment of Gaza as well. The EU condemns Israel's attacks on peacekeepers in Lebanon as Netanyahu accuses UNIFIL of acting as a human shield for Hezbollah after a fifth UN staff member is injured. And with just 3 weeks to go until Election Day, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris hold events in the pivotal battleground state of Pennsylvania. That is all we have time for. Coming up next is Riz Khan, and at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, join Tom Burgess-Watson for Global News Today.